Yeah, there you go. We need to get you mic'd real quick. Get the thing on your ear. So this is an amazing turnout. Thank you guys for coming on a Friday morning. We're gonna be somewhat informal up here. As Mia's getting mic'd, what I'm gonna do, so I'm Susie Adams, I'm the CTO for Federal. Everybody better smile and have a great time, because Greg is my boss. So, yeah, let's act like you're having a great time.
I have 9 o'clock call if that makes you
and you can't be more diverse than I am right now. Okay, so, and we're gonna spend, I guess we have, what, about 20 minutes till 8:50, I think is when we have. Just kind of talking about diversity in really the spaces that we work. And so with that, I've been with Microsoft for 20 years. I grew up as a developer and worked in the consulting space for 15 years prior to joining Microsoft, and then came into the sales role. I ran the Microsoft Technology Center for 4.5 years out of Reston, and then jumped back into the sales role as the CTO for the federal business for about the last 8 or 9 years. So with that, I'm gonna just go straight down the panel here and let each panelist introduce themselves, tell the audience a little bit about what you do today, and if you could just spend a couple of seconds or minutes talking about how you actually got to where you're at today. Because I know one of the things, I had a career discussion with a gentleman in Microsoft the other day, and one of the things he asked me is, did you plan out your career? Did you think you were going to be the CTO of Federal? And that was a resounding no. That is not what my career aspirations were when I started. So he was very interested in learning how I got there, what are the things I did, how did I put myself in the right places at the right time to get this opportunity. So with that, Karen.
Good morning, Karen Britton. And to Susie's point, yes, we all got here very, very differently. I currently work for LMI, Logistics Management Institute, a nonprofit in which we support federal government. I run the government digital services team. But getting back to how I got there, I spent majority of my career in the federal government, mostly with Navy, taking on varying opportunities and positions, starting off as a project engineer, working in the submarine community, which is very different, and moving into acquisition program management, and eventually I was the deputy CIO at Naval Sea Systems Command. In 2009, I had opportunity of a lifetime to go work for the Obama administration and support as special assistant to the president and CIO. I was there from 2009 to 2015, doing a lot of work. There was pivotal change, as you all know, doing a lot of work in open source technology and cloud and cyber. I left, went to work for a small woman company, startup, again supporting federal government. You'll see that vein throughout, and ultimately landing back, as I said, for a nonprofit. And I also do a little bit of an adjunct faculty, working at UMBC in their cybersecurity master's program.
Great. Misu?
Hello, I'm Misu Tasnim. Thank you again for the opportunity to step in here for Shannon. So Shannon was the executive director of our HHS team at US Digital Service, a role that I have now slipped into as of this Monday, so all kinds of new things happening this week. So my path to how I got here, my background is in electrical engineering. I was doing software engineering at NASA, fresh out of college for a few years, really enjoyed it. Like, science is what I live for. So science and engineering, working at NASA was always a dream. So I did that for a few years. Realized that, soft skills needed some work, because I just really enjoyed sitting in a lab, not talking to anybody, just writing code. It was great. But I realized every time we had to do a code review, I was just going into super anxiety mode, and I was like, okay, we gotta work on some soft skills here. We got the hard skills down. Started working on a master's to keep my hard skills in shape, and then moved over into project management as a forcing function to just really get out there. It was sink or swim. And then ended up talking all day long to people, and I was like, oh God, okay. We gotta get the anxiety in check. So did that for a few years. Really missed being technical, but at that point, just having been out of engineering for a few years, had to figure out where I wanted to go with my career and my blend of hard and soft skills at that point. found a startup in San Francisco that needed help working in the government space. They were a startup, very Silicon Valley minded. My background has been in government contracting. So I moved out to San Francisco, worked as a product manager for them. That was sort of that good in between of technical and non-technical skill sets that I had at that point and the government experience. So worked as a product manager there, working on healthcare, data analytics type projects for both Medicaid and Medicare services. Learned a whole lot about modern technologies, the things that I was keeping up at NASA were things that had been thrown into the sky in the 80s, so it was like very older technology. So just getting a feel for more modern tools and technology was like a very cool experience. Ended up crossing paths with the US Digital Service team, and then as a contractor, it was a very different experience. They came in and said, well, here's your contract award, in a week we're gonna have a kickoff, and I was like, that's funny, like, it'll be 6 weeks, great, like, and then they said, no, actually, it's next week, and I was like, oh God, I don't have my flight information. So I was like, oh, these people are not joking when they have these quick, aggressive timelines, who are these people? So ended up finishing off a project for Medicare at the startup, took a little bit of time off, applied to US Digital Service, and have been here for a year, and it's been a fantastic and great ride, and was like so excited to be in the government space as we sort of rewrite how we do technology in the government. It's been a very cool experience.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah.
Whoa, so it's been a ride, I'll say. So I started off, I did not plan to come into IT at all. I actually was a biology major. I decided I wanted to be a doctor, so I was pre-med. But my aversion to blood and anything inside of a human being quickly required me to change paths. As such, I enlisted in the Air Force, again, kind of unplanned. From there, I was put into a situation where I was working in a hospital at Andrews Air Force Base, Malcolm Grow. And I was selected to be a part of the comms group to then train doctors and nurses on, can you believe it, the Windows 95 rollout. I think I'm starting to age myself a little bit. But nevertheless, the trajectory from there really kind of, I think is, pretty amazing when I look back at it, because from a trainer to a help desk technician to a network engineer under the floors in the State Department working on Banyan Vines. If anyone in here is old enough to know what Banyan Vines is, that's how they send cables to the rest of the world. And then from there, I really just kind of jumped into opportunities and found my home and my space really in enterprise architecture, surprisingly. And learned really that I was very solution oriented, and I think it's really history from there. I ended up as the chief architect, and I've done some capital planning in my past. And ultimately, I am now a chief information officer. Again, not something that I thought I really wanted to do after working under my previous boss for 7 years and really learning how to serve. Because ultimately, anyone who works for a CIO needs to learn how to serve. Because it is critical to the success of the organization that the leader have people behind them that ultimately know how to get the job done. So that's, I think that's ultimately what led me here. I won't bore you with the details of my journey into this job, but ultimately now it's really about prescribing and helping to engage my business on using their imagination about what they want to be. That's a hard task for a CIO, because generally, we're kind of known as like the lead help desk person, right? That's, I go to this person because my phone doesn't work. And they don't take us serious. And they don't necessarily see you as a part of the strategic leadership of the organization. And I don't know if I don't think that is specific to women. I think it's just specific to the role and how it needs to further emerge especially in the 21st century when all of your business is technology-based in some way. And therefore, the CIO can't be, I'm about to preach here, so I'll be quiet. But the CIO cannot be the last one to the table, right? When we're talking about planning for the future. So
That's great.
thank you.
So it's interesting, you know, when I think about diversity and inclusion, it's obviously the top on top of everybody's mind these days, which is, I think, a great thing. I mean, I can remember when I started out right out of college, I don't think I ever worked on a team where there was another woman, ever. But at least 10 years. There just was not. I grew up as a developer. I went into a program, you know, and it was all men. And I just, it was no, you know, that was just kind of how it was. There wasn't a lot of diversity across the board, really anywhere in the IT space. So there didn't seem to be a lot of diversity. But a lot of times right now, people are like, oh, we're just checking the box, that diversity box, kind of thing. What I've actually found is that the more diverse a team is, the more, the better innovation that comes out of it. One of the examples, when I ran the MTC, we probably had one of the most diverse teams, both from, you know, a ratio of women to men, but also diversity across the board. And I think that one of the things that really helped us was just how differently everybody thought and the way people communicated. You talked about how you were the developer or, you know, IT person behind the door and people would slip things under there, and that's kind of how you wanted to live. And I actually was like that too. And somebody made me present publicly, and I was like, you're crazy. And that's kind of how I got to where I am. But when I think about the diversity of all the different people I had on that team, we solved some really tough challenges, mainly because everybody communicated differently and everybody worked differently. And when we all sat in a room, things just happened more quickly. And I couldn't figure out why, but it was really because of just the different, I mean, we had somebody who'd been trained fluently in Russian, that was a Russian citizen and became an American citizen. We had, and they all had different experiences with different educational backgrounds. And so if you had to think about one time or one situation that you've been in over your career where diversity is really what you think powered or fueled the innovation in government, could you talk just a little bit about that? What was that, what was special about it, or what was that kind of breakthrough moment where you realized, wow, the diversity really helped me here, right, in this team that we put together?
Well, you know, I'll say for me, as I was talking about entering in 2009 in the Obama administration at such a tremendous time of change, to your point, Susie, about rolling out different platforms and engaging and involving different people across the community, we were really looking at the way that the president communicated with the citizens across the country. And as I said, looking at ways to enable open source platforms in a cloud environment. So, you know, when you think about cloud technology in itself, it's not the technology that makes it successful. It's having a good contract. It's the user experience. It's all the pieces that enable it. So one of the big frustrations of mine was seeing people come into the White House at different events and seeing the U.S. Secret Service pull out that big long Excel spreadsheet, running down through the names and all the PII information that was there. We wanted to roll out a customer relationship management platform, a CRM platform, and we were using Salesforce. So I think I talked to me about this earlier. And the piece about that was really diverse and innovative was, again, moving with the speed of light, enabling things like the tech bar, pulling in folks from contracts to understand what the requirements were. We were working with folks in White House, folks from whether it was White House correspondent or Valerie Jarrett's organization. We actually had folks that had various use cases that they knew we needed to be successful on. We wanted to enable people to know who was invited to the White House, who came, what gifts were brought in, all of this data and all of this information that could be put into a tool. So the benefit about it was, as we rolled out the RFP, we got down to 2 top candidates. And we didn't do a down select. We had 2 big enablers in the government space working with our folks who identified specific use cases, and whichever contractor came back with the platform, with the tool, we utilized that all within CRM. So to say that we had folks from contracting, to say that we had people running our Agile Scrum, to say that we had technologists, we had folks in the government who for the very first time were working in the government. So they weren't used to a lot of bureaucracy, they weren't used to things taking a great deal of time. And we made it work to the point where we had so much information in our CRM platform that when we hit Affordable Care Act and kind of had, you know, that the big debacle at the time back in 2012, it was, we got a direct request from the president who wanted to know all the information that was in the tool, who wanted to know if any question came into White House, specifically related to health, healthcare, ACA, that question would get directly to that agency. And we were able to do that in you know, very short turnaround. So to your point again about innovation, a variety of thoughts and users and people with varying backgrounds coming together to make something very successful, that to me was, that definitely was one of our standout opportunities that we took.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
I think diversity of thought, but also diverse teams is becoming, I think, more and more prevalent. You know, when I look across the landscape of the projects that we run, you know, it is truly a kaleidoscope of people that ultimately help us be successful. I think one of the things that has really spurred innovation is because of people's diversity of thought and experiences, you must create a culture within your organization that doesn't beat people up for not agreeing. So if you ever sit in a meeting with any of the, so if you ever sit in a meeting in my organization, it is, some people are quite taken aback because the type of leader that I am is that I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, and I don't want my thoughts and direction to go unchallenged. Why? Because it is very important that I have varying perspectives that ultimately I can use to make the best decision, and I quite frankly don't have all the answers. And so what we're learning is when we are working with millennials and when we're working with baby boomers, I think I was saying this to someone earlier, you know, there are two demographics that you ultimately, in the space right now, that you have to be able to serve. And having those members on your team is critical to your success because you don't engage with those demographics the same way. And therefore you can't deliver technology as a one-size-fits-all. And nor can you deliver a government program as a one-size-fits-all. So those are, you know, I can probably name several projects, but those are kind of the foundational principles of, I think, running a 21st century organization with the understanding that you have to collaborate, even as a CIO, right? It doesn't matter the grade structure, but everyone has a piece of the success, and in order to feel that way, you have to bring them to the table.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think life experiences really helps in the innovation sphere, not just in government, but in product like development and delivery in general. We are making this huge push now across industry for human-centered design, and I think you really start to live it when you realize that there are humans in the room that are building your tool. I think we tend to just say, like, we are this team. There's the engineers, there's the data scientists, and like you just label people by their function. But once you start to see them as humans, you realize, like, I work in the Medicare space right now. You realize that I have a engineer whose mother just passed away. She was on Medicare, and she has a lived experience as a millennial interacting with the Medicare system for a patient. She is not the patient herself. I have somebody who is just about to retire. So she has been out of touch with the technology, but she's about to retire. She has a sense of urgency that she brings into that room. She's like, we gotta get these ideas off the ground and out the door before I leave in January. So that sense of urgency, that lived experience from two very different generations, and how we use technology to interact, to me, that's innovation, and it needs to start within our rooms before we can say, like, human-centered design out in the world and building the right product for the right people. Like, you have to recognize that the people building it are also players in that same game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys, and I think that when we think about the challenges of having a diverse, and it can be diverse from an age populace. I've gone through very different very different experiences than some of the younger folks that are coming right out of school. And what I find sometimes, and it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, is sometimes I'll go into a meeting and some voices aren't heard. And maybe it's not because they didn't speak up. I mean, how many times have people spoke up in the room and you know that the words came out, but nobody really heard you, right? And maybe it's because somebody else says the same thing a little bit later on, and you already said it. Right? And you're so frustrated. Lots of hands going up in the back. And this happens across the board. Right? And I don't think it's deliberate in any way, shape, or form. It's people's, it's just how they've grown up or how they perceive individuals in general. And so one of the things that I heard from, especially on your leadership and principles there, is that everybody should have a voice at the table, right? And everybody should be heard. And so how do you ensure that actually happens in your organizations or when you're in a meeting? What are some of the tips and tricks for the audience to help themselves be heard in situations where maybe they're going to disagree with the most senior member there or with the idea in general? How do you actually, what's the best way to go about that? How do you actually, what do you do as a leader to make sure that everybody else at the table is going to listen to that person?
You have to model that behavior. The way that we do it is, you've got myself, I have to bring people in a room, right? I have to do that. And so by doing that myself, I then often communicate with my other leaders, you need to do the same thing, right? You have to, I think, all of us who've been to college, we've had some kind of psychology course that talks about, the different needs of communication, right? The different mediums of communication. Well, you have to practice that, right? You can't just communicate to people by email, right? And a meeting sometimes is not enough. We have things such as what we call a deep dive, where deep dives are 2 hours, right? They're 2 hours because we need to spend time with the staff to really make sure that everyone understands something that we're trying to do, or that we need everyone at the table because we don't know what to do, right?
Right.
So I think personally, as a leader, you yourself have to be the model of bringing people together. You have to demand that your leaders also use that same model of different mediums of communication. And it makes people feel good. Something as simple as walking through the offices, touching someone on their shoulder, maybe. Walking through the office, making eye contact with people, talking to them, where they may say, hey, in that meeting, I didn't want to speak up, but now that I've got you, I want to tell you what I really think.
Yeah.
And that's okay too.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, it really is cultural. We as leaders in our own right have to create a culture of diversity and inclusion. I know for me, even at our company now, we have different groups and different forums, right? Whether it's the Women's Forum, whether it's LGBTQ. We had a young man come in and said, I don't really see a forum for me. And he started to talk about it, and his boss enabled him to create a program in which I'm the executive sponsor, Minority Ethnicities, me. I actually love the name me, right? We all see ourselves in that. And so he was empowered to start a community that didn't exist. It wasn't that he was poo-pooed off to the side or something. And we also need to enable leaders with the tools that they have to to have, I would say, courageous, open dialogue with people on their team of various culture and ethnicities. In some cases, just like, waking up and listening to the news can be very, very challenging in and of itself. And just knowing that that person is expected to come in, to work, to perform, to do it, everybody expects that they're gonna do a great job. But understanding what people might be going through as part of their day is huge, is significant. Understanding that a workspace environment to an early career professional looks very different, right? That's also, I remember when we knocked down barriers and knocked down walls in my former office, and I had someone come tell me that I was actually reducing the role of the CIO. And I said, wow, that was amazing, right? On the contrary, I had others come, so I reduced my space. I had a huge office, desk, chair, big mahogany, took all that stuff out, knocked down the walls, moved, reduced my space, opened up the place. And I had so many others, on the contrary, said, this is a very open environment. We feel like we're getting tons of work done. We're working across teams and it's great. And so just understanding what a simple change like that can do for inclusive behavior, for openness, and understanding, to Mia's point, the variety of folks that you have in your organization. That's creating that culture, and it doesn't happen overnight, of course, but just being ingrained to sort of think that way is where we need to start to see the change.
Yeah, and I think listening is a big part of that. Like, we bring people into rooms. I would not be where I am if somebody didn't give me the floor to speak. Like I said, I've always been quiet and shy, and somebody had always looked out for me. I was fortunate enough that someone in rooms were like, hey, what's your idea? I had expressed to managers that I'm too shy to speak in meetings, like, please call on me outside of meetings. So, like, because I know that is something that, like, I live by, like, knowing who the quiet voices are in meetings and, like, getting their thoughts before or after meetings. I had one engineer who I just could not relate to because he was, like, so far left of being quiet that I was like, gosh, this has surpassed even my shyness. I don't know how to interact with you. I ended up reading the book Quiet because I was like, I gotta figure out how to work with this guy and get his thoughts. He's a brilliant mind, but he's not expressing himself in these meetings. So just knowing, like, the diversity of not just people's, like, ethnicities, their orientation, their backgrounds, or where they are in their life experiences, but just how they work and listening to that and being custom. It's not a one size fits all. You can't whiteboard because not everyone is going to support the interaction at a whiteboard.
I think that's a consistent theme that we're hearing across all your answers was it's not a one size fits all. I think a lot of times today that people want to put based on somebody's title or years of experience, they want to say that this is the box you're in. Have you guys ever seen the box that you talk to it and goes, let me out of here? It's like, not. All right, I have a lot of those if you want one. Because I never really fit in a box. And I think that is one of the things that I learned when I went into management is that everybody that worked for me learned differently. They liked different things, they communicated differently, and if I was gonna help them succeed, which was what my job was, I was going to have to learn how to communicate in their style, shape, fashion, and help them learn the way that they like to learn. Some people like their classes, some people like to learn, on the job. Some people have all kinds of challenges going on at home where they, don't bring it to work, but sometimes you can help that person by, just delaying something, a couple days where they can get some things off their plate. And so that's a great central theme. So we only have a few minutes left. So if you had to, again, back to this conversation I had with somebody inside our organization about career growth, he asked me, what's the best advice you ever got? And the whole reason I got into kind of public speaking and actually into Microsoft was because I had a manager who really pulled me out of my shell and forced me to do things that were super uncomfortable for me. Present publicly, Some of you know Jonathan Zuck, you know Zuck, he was the guy that did this. And he told me you're gonna go present in front of 50 people, and it was 800. I thought I was gonna kill him when I was done. But it made me do it for 2 years, and it actually became something I really liked to do, and I never would have guessed, ever in a million years, that that's where my career would have gone, and now all I do is talk, and when I lose my voice, I realize that, which is happening right now. But the best advice was basically keep an open mind, right? Sometimes career choices and opportunities present themselves. Don't say no right away. Don't say yes if you're super uncomfortable, but experiment, look around, keep an open mind into what you could do, because that one move may change your career trajectory for the rest of your career. So I'm gonna go and each one of you, if you could just give some advice to the crowd about the things that you've learned and maybe something that really helped you in your career.
Well, I would say one of my mentors and coaches said this to me a long time ago. And, this person, we came from totally different backgrounds. He was a Navy captain. But he said, Karen, he saw something in me, and it's something I didn't even see again. But it's about being true to yourself, being authentic. It's about being open to change. It's about being prepared, right? Because when that time came and I look back to all these different pivotal moments in life, and you get to the horseshoe, you're trying to figure out which side to go. I actually was prepared. We talked about how we started off, and for me it was engineering, and then moving into program management, and moving into acquisition, and landing into IT. I too started off as an enterprise architect, capital planning person. But being prepared, because when that opportunity presents itself, and it will, for you, in whatever capacity, shape, or form, whatever position, that you want to be that person in that job and in that position on the journey to the career of your dreams. You want to. You want to make it so hard for you not to be that person that you are the most prepared. And that has stayed, that's kind of been the test of time with me, but that's what I would recommend. Not the test of time.
My best advice came from someone that I very briefly crossed paths with, and it's very simple advice, and I'm sure we've all heard it. I had this conversation with him because I was like, identity crisis is a thing that I struggle with, and it follows me everywhere, in my personal life, in my career, everywhere. Growing up, I tried as hard as I could to not present externally as a minority, which is really hard. You can't change that, which 9-year-old me didn't quite understand and know how to grapple with. And as I grew through my career and tried to figure that out, I had this conversation with him, because I was like, you kind of look like me, and to have a similar lived experience. What did you do? You're older. How do you deal with this? And he just said simply, he's like, you don't have to fit in. And going back to what you were saying about being put into a box, I always found myself in a box, and I was like, but I don't quite fit. Even in college, I shopped in the men's department because I was like, I'm the only woman engineer in this classroom. How do I fit in? I'll just dress like everyone. But just hearing that, I was like, oh, I can paint my nails, I can wear jewelry that I like, and I can show up to work, I can write code, I can also present, and that's okay. I don't have to fit into this one box.
I think that's great advice. I think a lot of people do try to fit in as opposed to be themselves and do what they love to do, because diversity is not seen as a good thing. And so if you're not, the norm, then therefore you're going to be singled out. So yeah.
I think my best advice, honestly, is don't be afraid to fail, right? I think it really depends on your personality, so I'm speaking from my own experience. But ultimately, if you don't take risks, you'll never know what's on the other side. And so preparation is key to risk taking, don't get me wrong, right? It's key to risk taking. But you can't be afraid to fail. When I took the job that I'm in, I had this moment, I think the night before I started, that I was like, oh my God, I am going to be the one throat to choke if something goes wrong. And that's a scary feeling for people, for many of us, right? But ultimately, right, you have to, it's the same ingredients that you need as an adult every day, ultimately, which is don't be afraid to make a decision. You have to make a decision or life will give you the choice, right? And so, all I can say is for those of you that are young in your careers, and even those that, are, 50% of the way, don't be afraid to fail.
Well, great advice from our panelists up here. Would join me in giving them all a hand.